When people talk about World War II survival gear, the conversation usually drifts toward factory-issued knives, bayonets, or the famous folding pocket knives carried by officers and scouts. That story sounds neat, organized, and reassuring. The reality on the ground was very different. Across Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific, thousands of soldiers, resistance fighters, prisoners, and civilians relied on blades that were never meant to exist. They were not stamped in arsenals or issued with serial numbers. They were hacked, ground, and shaped from scrap metal pulled out of wreckage, workshops, and abandoned equipment. These crude blades outperformed folding knives in the conditions that mattered most. They did not fold, they did not jam, and they did not fail when dirt, blood, or cold entered the mechanism. Today we are going to examine the World War II scrap blade, why it was trusted more than folding knives, how it was made, and how the principles behind it remain relevant for anyone interested in survival, preparedness, and historical fieldcraft. Why did folding knives often fail in wartime conditions? Well, folding knives might look efficient on paper, but the harsh realities of war really punished any kind of complexity. Mud, sand, rust, and even freezing temperatures would, work their way right into the pivot points and locking mechanisms. Once those parts were compromised, a folding knife could actually become quite dangerous to the user, collapsing under pressure or just refusing to open when you needed it most. Many wartime folding knives were, also lightly built, really intended more for camp tasks than for any sort of hard use. Soldiers digging shallow foxholes, cutting wire, prying open crates, or shaping wood, well, they quickly learned the limits of having moving parts in their knives. The scrap blade emerged as a response to these failures, not as some kind of novelty, but truly as a necessity. Scrap blades were, in fact, born out of scarcity and improvisation, as folks made do with whatever materials they had on hand. Scrap blades came from whatever steel could be found. Aircraft aluminum was often too soft, but vehicle leaf springs, broken bayonets, saw blades, files, and industrial cutting tools provided excellent high-carbon steel. Resistance fighters in occupied Europe frequently repurposed farm tools or factory offcuts. Prisoners of war shaped blades, secretly using concrete floors as grinding surfaces. Frontline soldiers modified damaged bayonets into shorter, more manageable knives. These blades were simple, full tang, and brutally effective. Their strength came from having no moving parts and no unnecessary features. Now, why did those fixed scrap blades outperform the issued knives, you might wonder? Well, the defining advantage of the scrap blade was, quite simply, structural integrity. You see, a single piece of steel running all the way from tip to handle meant there were no weak points at all. Even when the scrap steel hadn't been heat-treated particularly well, it often surpassed factory knives once it was put through some honest hard labour. These blades, well, they could do just about anything. Batten wood, pry open crates, scrape frost, cut wire, and even serve as last-ditch defensive tools if the situation turned dire. Folding knives, let's be honest, were tools of convenience. Scrap blades, on the other hand, were tools of survival. And, that difference really mattered when supply lines failed and replacement gear was just impossible to get your hands on. Now, let's talk about how World War II users shaped and sharpened these blades. Most scrap blades, followed pretty simple shapes. Straight spines, modest points, and thick edges were the norm, mostly because they were easier to grind and, less likely to snap under pressure. Sharpening was done frequently and quite aggressively. A blade didn't need to look refined, it just needed to bite. Many users actually left the edge just a bit convex, which increased durability while still maintaining solid cutting power. Handles were often wrapped in whatever was available. Cloth, leather, wire, or even rubber scavenged from old equipment. Comfort, honestly, was secondary to control. A secure grip under stress mattered a whole lot more than appearance. These blades were used in daily survival tasks, and having a firm hold could make all the difference. Scrap blades became multi-purpose tools. Soldiers used them to cut rations, strip wire, carve tent stakes, and modify equipment. Resistance fighters used them for silent work, including cutting fences and disabling machinery. Civilians used similar blades for food preparation, firewood processing, and repair work under occupation. One blade often replaced several tools. This efficiency reduced weight and eliminated dependence on specialized gear. The blade was always ready because it never folded, locked, or needed adjustment. So, how does this knowledge apply to modern survival and preparedness? Well, the lesson of the World War II scrap blade isn't about nostalgia. Not really. It's about design philosophy. Simplicity survives chaos. In modern preparedness, a solid fixed-blade knife made from quality steel is still more reliable than, say, complex tools in harsh environments. For practical application, choosing a blade with a full tang, a modest length and simple geometry really mirrors the strengths of those wartime scrap knives. And learning basic sharpening and maintenance, that ensures continued performance even when you don't have any specialized equipment on hand. In emergency kits, a single durable blade often outperforms multi-tools once conditions start to deteriorate. History just keeps on validating this approach. Modern military and bushcraft communities, they quietly reinforce what World War II survivors already knew. Fixed blades really do dominate serious field use, simply because they fail less often. The scrap blade, it wasn't better just because it was crude. No, it was better because it respected reality. War, after all, strips life right down to the essentials, and equipment that manages to survive those conditions earns its reputation honestly. So, just to wrap things up, the World War II scrap blade stands as a reminder that survival in the end favours function over form and reliability over convenience. These blades, they weren't admired, collected or celebrated at the time. They were simply used until they broke, and, honestly, many never did. If this exploration into forgotten wartime ingenuity added a bit of depth to your understanding of history and practical survival, do consider supporting Backyard Wisdom by subscribing, sharing this video, and helping to keep this sort of hard-earned knowledge alive for future generations.